Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, we are talking about a big branding change in the Microsoft ecosystem and its relationship to changing trends around finance automation, commerce technology, and real-world business outcomes. SignUp Software is now one company with multiple Dynamics 365 solutions under the brand name Truvio. Truvio is the sponsor of this episode, and my guests to discuss the news and the related trends are Kris Marcus, Director of Partnerships at Truvio, and Rob Ashe, Chief Revenue Officer at SJS Dynamics. My guests discuss Truvio's product outlook, share some real-world outcome stories, and offer thoughts on the role of AI in finance and commerce technology. All right, well, I am here with Rob Ashe and Kris Marcus. Welcome to you both. Maybe we could just start with a few introductions. Kris, welcome and tell us about yourself.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Kris Marcus. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Truvio. I have been with the company, I was with the commerce company for 2 years, now have migrated into the Director of Strategic Partnerships role here at Truvio.
All right, great. And Rob, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. So my name's Rob Ashe. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for SJS Dynamics. We're a boutique services shop who focuses specifically on the commerce space, and the dynamic web product is something that we've had a lot of background and experience on. And we focus on implementations for SMB and enterprise customers for the Business Central and F&O products for Microsoft.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to kind of setting the stage here of your outlook on the market, trends that you're seeing, and some of the latest updates from the companies. So yeah, let's get into it. Maybe we'll just start with a little bit of sort of market outlook here. Kris, what are some of the changes that you're seeing in the D365 market right now that are making commerce and finance automation so important?
Mostly what I'm seeing in the market is there's a major pressure to increase margin and shift to a recurring revenue model. I'm seeing the B2B customers are expecting really more of a B2C type experience, and it's creating pressure to reduce manual processes, things like order entry workloads, automation in commerce and finance. And now they're being viewed as margin protection strategy rather than a technology upgrade.
Yeah, Rob, from your perspective, what can you share?
Yeah, I think at least with many of the clients that we're talking to right now, there's some organizations that are, involved in M&A activity. So they've got injections of cash from either private equity or venture capital firms and trying to focus those investments, exactly like Kris is saying, on improving margins, especially if they're coming in with fresh allocations for, growing businesses. One of the things that they look at are some of the core systems, and especially things that impact either the internal kind of efficiencies on, order processing, especially within the commerce space. That's one of the things that when we're talking with prospects and some of the things that they're talking about, like the challenge that they have on processing orders and handling the amount of volume that they have, trying to find better ways to do that. And I think a lot of the central focus that they have is making sure that they have a good handle on their data. I think that's one thing that especially SMB companies, as they start to grow, once they reach a certain threshold, it just becomes really difficult for them to get a handle on really the current state of their business at any given time. So really trying to make sure that they've got the right systems in place to not only handle and manage the data, but then be able to leverage that into insights and to take action from it.
Both of those points will really help set the stage for today's conversation. But before we go any further, I think we should also just talk about the recent announcement that some people might have heard already. We certainly covered it, but it's that SignUp has evolved into a company with multiple solutions across the D365 ecosystem. It's called Truvio. And yeah, Kris, how should customers and partners sort of understand that change and why it matters?
I think the biggest shift is that we are no longer known as SignUp, Dynamic Web, and SKSoft. We're not just the Xflow AP automation company any longer. Truvio has really evolved into a single organization with a unified, broader mission. We're trying to deliver multiple solutions across the D365 ecosystem. Again, that spans AP automation, commerce, workflow, and financial operations. Why this matters is because customers and our vendors, our partners, really want fewer vendors to have to deal with when you're looking at ISVs to fill those spaces that D365 finance and operations or BC, the ERP solutions have. Our vendors want tighter integration and a single roadmap for finance modernization.
Certainly an interesting development. And I think what we're really, enhanced today's story, sort of having that background. So thank you. Rob, let me turn back to you from a partner perspective. What are your thoughts on the advantages of having sort of an ISV partner that has sort of complementary solutions as opposed to working with multiple partners to support your clients?
Yeah, I think really the customer benefits in a very specific way because one, yes, you have less partners, you have less, conversations and contracts that you have to manage, but you can also have a lot more strategic focus on what you're doing with the platform. So if you're a customer who's a mid-sized manufacturing organization who's made a significant investment in the Microsoft platform for Dynamics 365 finance and operations, having, a catalog of ISV solutions that you can then add in to optimize your implementation and get those business outcomes that you kind of put in your business justification to get the investment in the first place, actually being able to deliver those and then have an aligned strategy to make sure that you're putting your customer at the center of each of those solutions. You think about you're using the rooms of the house analogy that Judson, kind of sales lead at Microsoft, uses. The platform itself kind of connects into multiple rooms of the house, and those solutions, the more they can leverage data, the more that they can talk to one another, the more that they can provide better experiences for the customer, then that's always going to create more value. And you have better longstanding relationships. And for us as a partner, that also provides more opportunity for us to be able to add other services with a long-term partnership, because we don't want to have, just short-term projects and be able to, deliver a point solution. Like, yes, that has value, but it's not nearly as valuable as having a long-standing relationship with a customer as a trusted advisor to then go through and say, hey, here's how we can approach your back office financials. Here's how we can set up your commerce experience for B2B. Here's how we can help support that within your sales orders and how your customer service team is working. Like, there's so much more value that can be added when you're working with an organization that has more really high quality solutions in their portfolio. And it also helps us because we can build that relationship with Truvio and, make sure that our technical resources are certified and up to date on the latest product functionality and technical roadmap, because that helps us build trust with those clients as well. So there's just a lot of really positive benefit just having a more of a centralized approach to that. And it just gives us a longer runway for a more fruitful partnerships.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that. So moving ahead here, we've talked about some of the market pressures that you both mentioned. We have a little bit better understanding of the new portfolio story and some of the opportunities there. Let's talk about urgency and what's driving urgency in the field now. So, Rob, SJS has been primarily commerce-led, right? And what are some of the why now signals that you're hearing that make AP and commerce, why they both have sort of more pressure and sort of more importance in being modernized and being valuable elements of a business strategy?
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of spin a wheel and pick one. I mean, it's pretty tough out there for anybody that's in a leadership position, either on the financial side, on the technology side, owning a business. I mean, any of the above. I think anybody who's got a high degree of certainty about any world event right now, I think I would maybe question their logic, because, you're looking at socioeconomic impacts, disruption across technologies with agentic AI coming into various industries and creating questions around that, monetary policy, fiscal policy. I mean, there's more risks that are out there than certainties. And I think what a lot of organizations are doing right now is they're just trying to protect their house, and they're trying to make sure that they've got as much control over their systems, their processes, being as efficient as possible with how they're delivering their products and services. And with organizations right now, if they're looking and saying, man, we have softness in this area, or we missed forecast in this for our inventory, any of those factors are signals that they need to take action. They're, depending on which industry you're in, especially the customers that we have a tendency to service, if they're in retail or CPG or manufacturing, these are razor thin margin businesses in pretty good climates. And when you're having inflation or supply chain issues overseas with, anything that's going on, the more they have predictive resources or predictive solutions to be able to say, hey, there's a potential signal here, we should take action. Business leaders want to get as close to predictive as they can, but they can't do it unless they take some of the foundational efforts first. And so they have to be able to make sure that they have a high quality, well-designed ERP solution in place. And then they need to start adding those solutions on top that are going to help deliver the value that they're looking for. We look at like a commerce experience, something that's highly connected, automated, has a really strong user interface so that they can build trust with their distribution partners. That's a project that we're working on right now, is making sure that this organization makes it as easy as possible to do business with them. And it seems kind of oversimplified, but that's kind of how the market will judge them. It's like, hey, if it's difficult to do business with you and I can't get my products, or I don't understand our pricing, or I don't understand my incentives, it opens the door for them to go somewhere else. And so that's what I think is kind of the core issue, that a lot of customers are coming to us and saying, hey, we need to grow, we need to protect our house. And these are some of the experiences that we can't deliver now, or it's clunky to be able to deliver now. Can you help us? And that's where we start to bring in, the expertise that we have within our leadership team and the folks that are helping deliver on these solutions, is to try and, help build that foundational layer for the customer, and then be able to make sure that we're providing them some resiliency, so that if, there's market downturns or there's other areas, that they can weather the storm and they can still deliver high quality experiences to their customers and partners.
All right, excellent. Yeah, Kris, what would you add?
I would add that one of the things that really needs to be focused on are reducing manual workarounds. That's one of the earliest warning signs in not being able to capture the margin. When teams start creating spreadsheets or rekeying orders, manually routing invoices, it signals that things aren't being captured cleanly. AP workflows aren't scaling with the volume, and workarounds really hide risk. They hide that risk to margin and cost, but they also indicate that the systems are no longer aligned with the business or, the economic experiences that we're having. It's causing slower order to cash. It's increasing invoice approval times, creates that delay in vendor payments. That's really where the data quality is going to break down for the company. Pricing discrepancies, mismatched POs and invoices. And then when that data becomes unreliable, it creates huge risk, not only for the business, but AI and automation initiatives will stall out as well. So not addressing some of those manual workarounds at the earliest warning signs could be critical, damaging to your business and keeping up with the market and the economic impact.
Yeah, and you raised some things we'll touch on again momentarily here, I think. Rob, anything else you wanted to add before we move on?
Yeah, I think too, especially as you look at organizations, as their products become more complex, their processes become more complex as well. Like one of the customers that we've done work with is a large department store, and they have not just individual products, but they have product variants. So they have different sizes, colors, all sorts of different things that create more complexity in the number of SKUs that they can handle and the configurations that the customers can order or their distributors can order. And all of the shipping options that happen, their connectivity within CRM systems and ERP systems, any little breakdown in process or lack of data can actually impact their processing times and ultimately their revenues. And when they can have a better approach with a unified commerce system that's also connected into their systems in a really efficient way, we've seen some significant increases, not just in the amount of revenue that they get. This particular customer got about a 30% bump in online revenue for their new commerce system, but to Kris's point, it also reduced their internal processing times by 50%. So not only did their revenue go up, but their margin also increased as well because they're actually spending less time internally on handling those orders. So they get kind of a double benefit on those like two key markers. And especially for the organizations that have that level of complexity, these are systems that they can't build on their own. They simply don't have the time, and many times they don't have the expertise to be able to do that. And that's kind of why they go out into the market to try and find those kind of industry leading solutions and the experts that have the experience in implementing those solutions for those environments.
Yeah, that would be quite the endeavor to build out your own sort of sophisticated commerce capabilities and maintain them and upgrade them and enhance them over time.
Yeah, and sometimes customers, oftentimes they try because they know their business really well and they're well-intentioned, but until they get partway down the road and they realize how much effort that takes and how much investment that takes away from other core things that they're doing, that's when they have to tap somebody on the shoulder to come in and help because they realize they're like, oh, wow, this is more complex than we thought. We've got a good start, but we need to kind of hand the baton off to somebody else here.
Yeah. And let me build on this for you, Kris. As commerce capabilities scale, what are some of the challenges with keeping AP efficient in the context of a growing set of commerce capabilities or an increase in volume?
Rob talked about variance, as order volumes increase and companies, especially manufacturing companies who have a very large SKU count, they often hit, a lot of the same friction points. Product data doesn't sync across channels. Pricing and contract rules live in spreadsheets. Inventory can't keep up with real-time expectations. And so a lot of the challenges that we're seeing, especially in the commerce, is how do you eliminate those manual processes? How do you keep pace with what your client or your customer is looking for in order to stay efficient? And I love Rob, that you brought up that self-developed commerce. It goes back to what's the broader mission of the company? How are you helping reduce or, increase those margins? And one of the things that customers are challenged with is doing that. How can we help increase or reduce those points, those friction points? So how do we help your company scale at this and stay efficient?
So, Kris, let me stay with you for this next question. When you're talking to executives, how do you quantify the business case here? What's the value that they are leaving on the table when they are still using manual processes or fragmented technology for commerce and finance?
I think it's pretty easy to quantify the business case from the leadership perspective or from an executive perspective. Automation reduces labor costs, accelerates cash flow, eliminates exceptions, strengthens vendor and customer experiences, and ultimately, for the company, it reduces compliance risk. We see mostly mid-market companies where the combined ROI from modernization, it can be significant. And strategically, it really creates that clean, structured process that with the data that's going to be required for AI and future growth of the company. So the second part of your question, what value are they leaving on the table? When commerce and finance stay manual, companies leave money on the table. It's pretty simple. It comes in the form of higher labor costs. You're having to repeat processes because they're manual, slower cash flow. Again, having to manually match POs to invoices. In previous life, in my career, I had to do that. Now, this was 25 years ago, but it could take me all day. And so the more modernization that you have, that you can create, you can reduce that lost revenue, reduce that vendor risk, and, that exposure and compliance. But I think the biggest loss really is strategic. If you can't unlock the data that you need because you're doing manual processes, you will never be able to get to that AI or scale without having those processes automated or some of those processes or most of those processes integrated. I think the opportunity cost is measured not just in dollars, but in competitiveness with your market.
All right, excellent. Let me change gears a little bit here. Rob, you've mentioned a couple of examples of really interesting scenarios where you've been working with clients. Can you share any others where you've worked together with Truvio to really change the outcome or the business results or the adoption of a solution compared to a more fragmented approach?
We spend a lot of time in the B2B space, especially if you have an organization that has, any sort of distribution model. There's one that comes to mind for wholesale and supply chain in a B2B environment where, when they originally started working with us, they had kind of a hodgepodge system. They had I would call it like a freemium type of setup that they had kind of put together within their existing environment, and everything was custom. They had each one of their distribution partners also had their own pricing. So you imagine if you don't have a centralized pricing book and every time you add a partner, it creates more complexity. And then you have to build that into the system that you have. And they don't have any basic reporting, but they probably need advanced reporting. And we were able to get in there, work with the customer, relatively short engagement. We're talking probably 3 months of implementation from start until go live. And when they went live on the commerce solution from Truvio, they were able to see a 35% improvement in their order processing. And their customer retention also increased by about the same factor. So, relatively modest investment gave them a ton of value that now they can start to build on and then focus on the core part of their business, which is building those relationships with the partners and shipping product. And that's ultimately what their core business is. I've heard other tech leaders say, well, every company is a tech company. I'm like, well, they're using technology, but that's not their core competency. If you're a B2B organization that's focused on, shipping CPG products, yeah, you are using technology, but it's really about your core business. Technology is just supporting that. And unless you're creating an application to sell to businesses like yours, you're still a B2B distribution company who's utilizing technology. And I think it's important one of my favorite sayings is keep the main thing the main thing. And that's why it's so important to utilize other organizations that specialize in the implementation of those solutions, because you get such high quality work at a fraction of the cost that it would take for you to learn how to do that if it's not something that you focus on. And especially within SMBs, I think there's a bit more of a tendency to, be a bit more do-it-yourself, especially if you've got, some competent and ambitious folks that are like, yeah, I think I can try that. But what they realize is, man, we could get this done so much faster with a modest investment up front, and then be able to focus on those longer horizon projects that actually have a tangible business value that you can look to your CFO and say, hey, we were good stewards of the investment that you had. Look at the results that we got. And then you open up more investment down the road. That's one of the things that I think has been the most rewarding for us with working alongside the team at Truvio, is just seeing the results that our customers have. And they want to be advocates for us now because they're like, wow, okay, we didn't think we were going to get this done this fast. Now what's the next project? So that's pretty exciting.
All right, excellent. Yeah, Kris, let me turn things over to you. Rob made some excellent points there. Anything you would add?
I think that just working with partners like SJS, they are really able to get in there and work closely with the customers, especially, being a boutique partner. SJS has been phenomenal in getting in, understanding the customer, getting to know their business processes from an implementation partner perspective. I think the greatest value that we see is, again, understanding who the customer is, understanding their business model, and really bringing forward the best in the solutions that we provide and representing Truvio.
All right. And Kris, let me stay with you here. If you are a D365 customer looking to enhance your ERP, and you need more automation, but you're not maybe sure where to invest first or where to focus your attention, what would your recommendations be for 2 or 3 things to assess to find a good starting point?
I guess first and foremost, look at the processes. What are your current processes today? Where's the bottleneck? Where is manual work piling up? Where's the data inconsistent? Where are the friction points between commerce and finance? I think looking at what those processes are that are most manual or most error prone are always the right places to start. It delivers fast ROI and it unlocks momentum for almost everything that follows.
Yeah, Rob, anything you would add when you see an organization kind of facing this challenge?
I always kind of go to first principles. It's, look at the core systems and are you measuring what matters now? Even when I'm talking to a client, one of the first things that I ask them is, why do you guys want to do this now? Like what's changed in your business? What are you measuring? What are the leading indicators that are showing you, hey, we have a goal of X and right now we're performing at Y and we've got to close that gap? Or hey, we're feeling this other pressure in our business, where we don't have investment for headcount. We can't scale at the growth rates that we're getting. Like what's the core issue that we're having? Then that helps us start to investigate where the challenges are. When you're looking at, what thing do we focus on? I always go to the core pieces of where does your data live? How do you access that data? How confident are you in that data? How often does it change? And what systems are you accessing it through? Whether it's you're bringing up Excel as your core ERP system or your order taking system, you're like, okay, that's clearly where we should probably start is, okay, how do we get this out of Excel and into some sort of system of record that's more automated, even if it's, got all sorts of cool macros and connections into your rest of your business. It's probably not something that's going to be scalable for a business. And then I try to put as much focus on when we're measuring things, the amount of time that it takes or the amount of like monetary impact if possible, because then that helps us build the business case as we're doing the discovery work so that by the end of understanding more about the problem, it makes us a lot easier for us to say, hey, how much investment is this going to justify? And how do we start putting some benchmarks around it? I think that served me really well in my career and working with customers, because sometimes the simple pieces, they haven't necessarily taken the time to sit down and really isolate like what's the real problem and like how do you prioritize which one of those things you do first. This seems a bit simplified, but I've found more often than not, those are the things that actually have the most impact at the end of a project.
So, Kris, I want to turn to you now. And you mentioned earlier some of the future capabilities that automation can enable. One of them you mentioned is obviously AI. Where does that fit realistically into the commerce and finance automation story today? What's useful now? What do you see coming next?
AI today is excellent at reading, making predictions and accelerating workflows. It really removes that manual work and improves efficiency across the organization. I think what's coming next is we're going to see a streamline of processes, and we're going to see more people seriously taking a look at AI and improving their internal workflows. Truvio is keeping pace with that. I can't say too much, but just be on the lookout for, improvements, for acceleration in our AI, and how we deliver to the market.
All right, certainly something to be ready to continue watching for. Well, I want to thank you both for being here, but before we wrap up, I'd like to get a prediction from each of you about what will Dynamics 365 leaders prioritize most in the next 12 to 18 months. Rob, why don't I start with you? Do you have a prediction?
If I was going to predict anything, I think there's a lot that's going on in the market. If I look at just Dynamics 365 finance and operations, there's just a lot of things going on in the business model for Dynamics and how Microsoft is actually going to market. And they're in process of, I think, adjusting how they're presenting their solutions, where you have a lot of, per user, per month focus on their individual licenses. And I think that as that starts to shift more towards agentic solutions, Microsoft is going to start making changes to, how they go to market. And I think it creates, challenges for organizations, because anytime you're going through any kind of business model changes, it's like, okay, well, we do it like this. How does this happen? How do we move in this direction? So I think a lot of organizations are, starting to think more about their broader stack and where they can invest, and ideally invest more in the Microsoft stack. But I think a lot of organizations, their fundamental business model changes when if you, especially enterprises, you start bringing in more agents into your environment. The licensing actually is approached differently. And I think that that's one of those things that, especially over the next year, you're going to start seeing more of the initial changes as that kind of starts to kind of flutter out into the market. And I think that there's a downstream implication for that as well, which is, either accelerating certain projects and bringing them forward as they're, bringing on new business units or whatever that is, taking some swings on AI focused projects, especially in the enterprise space where they might be a bit more mature for how they're approaching data and their business processes, and they can maybe take some swings with investment there. On the SMB side, I actually think a lot of it's going to be, more straightforward. I think they're going to be slower to adopt, and I think they're going to be focusing more on core business processes to enable AI later. But based on what I'm seeing in our conversations, they're focused more on the foundational efforts as opposed to being ready to, kind of go all in on some of the AI solutions right now.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so much to consider there. And Kris, let me put the same question to you. Do you have a prediction? What do you see D365 leaders prioritizing over the next 12 to 18 months?
I see a closer look at replacing legacy systems, chasing that. The executive leadership are going to chase efficiency. How are they going to reduce those manual processes? They're going to have to do it, I think, to keep pace with the economy, to make faster changes within their organization, and really just be more agile. I also see bigger prioritization coming with AI. Microsoft is not letting off of that speed, and I think fewer moving parts and automation that scales for any organization, especially those that are using D365, is going to be critical.
Some very interesting predictions there, including some outlook on some of the biggest challenges, I would say, in enterprise software channel businesses everywhere. Legacy migration, modernization. We'll be watching very closely, I think. I will anyway, and I'm sure you both will as well, at how some of those trends sort of unfold here. And this has been really fun. I'm glad we got a chance to chat and get sort of an update on where Truvio is and learn a little more, Rob, about how you work with the Truvio team as well, with your clients and their technology needs. Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Kris and Rob for joining me. And this message comes to you from Truvio. If today's conversation resonated, the next best step is to get clear on where you have the most friction: commerce experience, AP workload, or both, and what success would look like in 90 days. If you'd like help pressure testing your priorities, reach out to Truvio and SJS Dynamics for a short discovery conversation and a practical roadmap you can act on. Check the show notes for more information. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.